and around the globe. More real talk, the kind you want, on Liberty Works Radio Network.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you and welcome to Feathering the Eagle's Nest. I am your host, Michelle Jefferson, and we are on Liberty Works Radio Network. The number to call in if you would like to join in on the conversation is 410-848-9191. One of the things I'd like to do before we get started this evening is to apologize for the fire alarm that went off during our broadcast last week. I thought it was pretty funny. I don't think our caller Jim did because he wasn't exactly sure what the heck was going on, but we do apologize for our technical difficulties. In keeping with the theme of our show, Feathering the Eagle's Nest and putting the Americans on the endangered species list, I'd like to talk tonight about the dilution of America via illegal immigration. One of the things that happens when illegals come into our country, they are an automatic drain on our social services. They get everything for free. Free housing vouchers, or at least at a reduced cost. They get free health care, food stamps, everything under the sun. That is an automatic drain on our country from the get-go. The biggest problem that I have with most of these folks that are coming into our country is that they like to recreate the hell that they supposedly came from. And I believe that that is by design. Back in 1997, there was a Latino conference held in Venezuela where they called for the downfall of the United States from within. Their suggestion to everyone was to take over the neighborhoods, push out the folks that are already there, whether they be black, whether they be white, it doesn't matter. Push them out. And that's what they did. Now, once you have everybody in the neighborhoods, then you start electing them to local offices. And in Maryland, we have our fair share of folks who are from other countries, who have become supposed citizens, and are now on our state legislature. Or we have folks who are so sympathetic to their needs that they have whatever guilt complex going along with this, to where they are pushing legislation like what we have here in Maryland, driver's licenses for the illegals, and we have in-state tuition for the illegals. Now, our kids get the in-state tuition, but we have American kids who would like to attend some of our state universities, but they can't afford to, or there are no spots left for our kids to come in, because now a certain percentage of kids in Maryland's universities have to have or spots available for them. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that insulting. Why is it that folks from other countries are able to say, well, we can use your Constitution, we can use your rules, we can use your laws against you, but when we cite the laws and the rules and the regulations that say, hey, you can't do that, well, we're not following those laws, but we're going to use these to shove it up your tailpipe. And I have a problem with that because it's not fair. And I guess fairness doesn't have anything to play with into all of this, and I guess that's another part that takes me off the Richter scale, but that's a whole other ball game. There was a column that I wrote a year ago, 7 years ago, and it was published in what I lovingly call now Pravda, and it was called Prepare to be Assimilated. And in this column that I wrote, nothing has gotten any better. And I'll go ahead and read a couple of the pieces out of here for you to see what I'm talking about. And it says, Maryland is the popular choice among illegal immigrants, and with good reason. Our state legislature is handing out free or reduced college tuition, driver's license, hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars to CASA to Maryland, and providing day worker spaces. Now senior lawmakers on the House Education Committee would like to give non-English speaking illegal students more than free breakfast, lunch, health care, food stamps, and welfare. While our children study and work hard to pass the standardized test for the No Child Left Behind law, non-English, now called First Learning English students, can be graded on how well they're doing at acquiring language skills instead of judging them on standard reading tests. We're hearing more and more about police, fire, and government workers being forced to learn Spanish or they're fired. Our government continues to reward bad behavior, but has the audacity to call us racist or intolerant. I am intolerant to those who continue to break the law, not pay the consequences, and have everything handed to them on a silver platter while I have to pay the bill. Many towns have taken matters into their own hands. That was back in 2007. But now we can't. The towns aren't taking things into their own hands. We have a Justice Department that's coming down on anyone who wants to enforce our immigration laws. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump off of this for a second. I'm told that we have a caller online, and his name is Bob. Hello, Bob. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Michelle. This is Bob, and I'm calling in reference to that because so many illegals are coming into this country. We need to secure the borders of the United States because not only illegal aliens are coming in, but some terrorists are coming across the border. So we need to get to the government and have them secure our borders. Governor Perry in Texas put out the National Guard, and now I see stuff on the news that the National Guard and the state police are having problems because the state police can't identify the National Guard, and that's a bunch of stuff. So we need to get together and find out how we can make the government realize the problems that these illegal immigrants are causing.
I think they know. I think they know the problem that they're causing, Bob, and they also know that there are things that can be done to stop this, but yet they choose not to do it. And what are we, short of going down and standing on the border ourselves, like some of the militia have done, what else do you think we should do?
Well, I think we should go back and enforce the immigration laws that we have, because those laws are enforceable, but our government is not enforcing them.
Well, there's I can't remember if it was a study or if it was a report that just came out, I want to say last week or the beginning of this week, that said that this administration is the most lawless administration in the history of our country. And it's going to be a little difficult to get him to enforce the borders and this administration to enforce the borders when they pick and choose the laws that they want to follow or the laws that they want to enforce. My question is why hasn't Congress finally stood up and done it themselves? Why are they being so lawless and not enforcing current law? Do you have a thought on that?
Well, I've sent emails to my congressman and my House representative, and they both responded back to me that they are in favor of all that. But I think that's a bunch of garbage, because when you check their voting record, they're voting against it. So I think we need to get new people in office. I think that's the answer to it. I think people need to get out this election time and vote new people in office so we can change our government.
Well, the problem that we're having right now, Bob, is that we're having historically low voter turnout. And if we don't get the folks out to vote, how can we make that change happen? It used to be that it was a civic duty to vote. Now, they've made such a mockery out of it. And most people they feel that their vote doesn't count. What do you think we can do for that?
Well, I think maybe some people should talk to their neighbors and friends and relatives and see how they feel and what's important to them, and then find the politicians that go along with those ideas and then tell them to vote for them. If they think the same way you think, that's how you should vote. It's easy as that. Just ask your neighbors, your relatives and friends, and encourage them to get out and vote.
And what do you say to those folks who say, we can't talk about religion or politics?
Well, this is a free country, and I believe in God, and those who do, I would talk to. If they don't believe in God, well, that's okay. That's your understanding, because this is a free country. But also, if you are a U.S. citizen, you need to exercise your right to vote. It's a constitutional right that you have a right to use to vote for somebody running for office.
You're
so they should
right.
research their candidates, find the ones that agree with them politically, and then exercise their vote. It's as simple as that.
Well, one of the things that I found funny was when I first started getting involved in politics, my kids would roll their eyes and, oh, my heavens, why are you doing this? And what difference does it make in politics? Yeah. Well, now that my kids are in their adult lives, they're understanding how important politics is, and most people don't realize politics is a part of your life every single day, whether it be office politics, family politics, grocery store politics, there's politics everywhere we go.
Right.
And it makes me laugh when people say, "Oh, I don't care. I don't want to know." And you know, as long as they don't bother me, I'm not going to bother them.
Well, I hope you don't mind this, but when you talk about children, because my grandchildren are in their teens, the youngest one is 8 years old, they're being taught Common Core in school. And I've sat with my grandson and looked at him trying to work out simple problems. And it looks to me like they're trying to change the way people think so that they cannot resolve problems. And I'm afraid that's what the government's doing to our kids by using Common Core, because it's changing their way of thinking. They're even taking history out of the history books.
You're right. You're on the right track. I'm not so sure if it's that they don't want them to be able to figure out problems as much as it is that they want to break their spirit.
Right.
And there's a big difference between the two, because if you don't have the spirit, if you don't have that gumption, that courage to stand up, and this listening audience hasn't been treated to my last act of defiance explanation, but we have to be able to stand up and say no. Common Core breaks the spirit. When
right. I agree with that.
You cannot get up and fight. You have no choice. And that's exactly what Obama and his buddies, Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, and that whole crew, this is specifically designed to break the American spirit. And if they break us far enough down, then they win. They couldn't take our guns, but if they break our spirit, and if they break the kids' spirit, then they don't have to deal with that generation coming back up and thinking that they could go ahead and be like our founding fathers. And since Common Core removes our founding fathers and most of the history of what created this country and what makes this country great being eliminated from Common Core, if they don't learn about it, if they don't learn about the courage, if they don't learn about the sacrifice, if they don't learn about patriotic duty, how are they going to be good Americans later in life? And that is the very reason why I say Americans are on the endangered species list right now.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. But there's an election coming up, and we can vote people into the school board to help get rid of Common Core.
And what are their names, Bob? We have George Harmoning.
Yeah, that's him. I know him.
Bud Nathan.
Bud Nathan's a good guy for that.
And
Very
Jim
good.
Roenick.
And Jim's a good guy, too. I will vote for all three of them because, well, they are true Americans.
Well, and you're absolutely right about that.
They have the right American spirit, and they're not bullies. They are just true Americans, and they realize that the only way we're going to bring about change.
Now live from coast to coast and around the globe, more real talk, the kind you want, on Liberty Works Radio Network.
And we listening to Feathering the Eagle's Nest at Liberty Works Radio Network. I am your host, Michelle Jefferson, and the call-in number here is 410-848-9191. And before we go to our next caller, I wanted to give everybody an update. I have been told that the iPhone app is now up on the Liberty Works website. It was just up for the Android before. It is now, they now have an iPhone app, so there is a link for that up on the Liberty Works website. Okay, and our next caller is I had told you last week that there are three gentlemen who are running for the school board or Board of Education here in Carroll County. George Harmoning, Bud Nason, and Jim Roenick. Now, we talked to George last week, and we also talked to Jim last week. And the third leg of this great team is Bud Nason. And, Jane, are you ready to patch him in? Bud, how are you today?
Hello?
Bud?
Yes.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, and I have to thank Bob for his kind words a few minutes ago. I did not put him up to it.
I know you did. I did. No, I'm kidding.
But I do appreciate where he's coming from, and the fact of the matter is that, as you pointed out in the earlier portion, individual communities are really under attack, and the interesting thing is that's what we're going to have to do in order to be able to take our country back and restore the American ideals, and that is one county at a time. There are something like 3,000 counties across the country, and every single one of them is facing the same kind of situation that you were describing earlier, and those that recognize it and respond to it are obviously in better position to be able to weather that and restore the ideal of what it really means to be an American and what America means to their community. So.
And I agree with you 100% on that one. Well, one of the things there's a couple things I'd like to talk to you about tonight. We can talk about the impact of the illegal immigrants on education, because it was in Montgomery County. There was something on one of the news stations earlier this week that they did not realize the financial impact that all of these kids that were dumped into Montgomery County were going to have on their school system. And boy, are they scrambling to try to make ends meet. And they got on our commissioners up here about not allowing any of those kids to come to Carroll County. And I'll tell you what, I'm real glad that they did, because we don't have enough money to do what we need to do right now. Putting that kind of a financial strain on our already strained budget for education would just really put us over the top. What do you think about that?
That's part of that old-fashioned concept called responsibility. When you have elected officials, they are, in fact, responsible to the people who elected them. And if they're there for some other reason, they don't belong there. It's that simple. And I understand the scenario that we were looking at here during July with the illegal children being sent here without any prior notification, clearance, medical exams, or any of the rest of that. And I know that everybody jumped all over the commissioners for taking the stand that they took, but that was a responsible position to take.
It was. It was a responsible position to take for our community.
Oh, yeah.
We have how many cases of tuberculosis breaking out now in California?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like 400.
Don't know the numbers, but the reality is that we're dealing now with communities across the country with diseases that we thought were eradicated.
Yes.
But they're being brought in, and I will not say that it's intentional. I will say, though, that it's very having a tremendous impact. And, yeah, it's affecting the respective communities' bottom line tremendously.
Well, in my humble opinion, this should be the top reason why our government should be enforcing legal immigration and not turning the blind eye or opening the blessed door for everybody and their daggone brother to come across the border.
Well, there's more to it than that, of course. As far as those unaccompanied minors are concerned, they only represent about 20% of that tidal wave. The other 80% contain people who are not exactly innocent, people who mean to do us harm. And for us not to screen them and filter out the ones that don't belong, that's unconscionable.
You racist, you racist, you.
Sure. You know what? I've heard that label so many times now, it's lost its sting.
Yeah, and that's why we're able to go ahead and make a joke about it now, because they have over. I mean, it's if you're against global warming, you're racist now too. I mean,
right.
that pretty much goes with it. But why don't you talk about some of the things going on with Common Core right now, and what you once elected, what you would like to do? I know that we had the other two on last week, and you don't really feel that there's much new here, but let's talk about some counterfeit diplomas and some of the content that's being left out and some of the content that's being put in.
Well, I'd like to say I'm happy to, except that it's not a happy subject. It happens to be a very sad fact. I'm looking at figures here in Carroll County, and I know that the program isn't limited just to Carroll, but we're not unique. There are counties across the country who are having the same kind of problems that we're experiencing, so it isn't just local. But in fall of 2012, something like 2,200 high school students graduated from Carroll County Public Schools. Almost a third of them went on to the local community college and registered there for classes. And turned out about 70% of those who registered for classes at the local community college were deficient in math. They needed to take remedial math. Now,
and before you go any further, Bud, for our maybe low information listeners, why don't you explain to them what you mean by that? That they need remedial.
Okay, means that they didn't learn what they were supposed to learn in grammar school and high school to be able to earn the diplomas that they received in June and then presented to the local community college in August for classes.
Okay.
In other words, they're standing at the front door of college, but they're not college ready, even though they have a diploma. And I don't consider that to be a valid diploma.
And they're not. You're absolutely right. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kevin.
That's okay. That's okay. It was the math was the highest percentage, but when you're looking at English and reading, they ranged in the 30% range. So you're dealing with products of the local high school system, and I'm not saying that it was the student's fault or that it's the teacher's fault, but there's a systemic problem here. And the thing that I keep hearing and talking with parents and also with teachers is that they're missing content. In other words, things that they should have been taught, things that should have been presented and included in the directed lesson plans that the teachers are given to use, like ratios, proportions, fractions, those sorts of things, they're not there. So a kid comes through 7th or 8th grade and should be learning that, never gets exposed to it, and never gets the opportunity to catch up until they get to college, and hopefully, when they're trying to play catch up in college, they'll pick up some of those foundation, basic blocks of learning that they're going to be using for the rest of their lives.
Well, but some people would say, okay, well, who has to use fractions in life? What is it during their everyday life that they have to use fractions? Why is it so important to understand fractions or even percentages?
Well, carpenters and mechanics need fractions all the time. Okay, nurses and doctors need percentages. If you're going to be doing any kind of financial calculations, including doing your own home budget, you need percentages. Those are just a handful of simple, straightforward examples.
True, and they're not it's not like they're for professions that, like you said, doctors as well as mechanics.
All the way, the whole range,
right.
Everywhere, from one end to the other end.
That is true. Okay, go ahead. I apologize again for interrupting.
That's okay. But as I say, this is not unique to Carroll County. This is across the board. When I talked with other people, in fact, I first learned about this when I was working in Frederick County, our neighboring county here, and working with the sports information director there, who also happened to teach remedial reading. And he told me the percentages there of remedial reading, and they corresponded with what I later learned to be the case in Carroll. And I said, "You got to be kidding me!" And he said, "No, this is the way things are these days." And then, in talking with other people around the state, I found out that the same numbers apply, maybe not precisely, but in the same range in Charles County and also over on the Eastern Shore. So this is not unique to a specific county. This, as I say, is systemic.
It is not. And, I've often told the story about them implementing outcome-based education when my son was in second grade, and they decided that they didn't have to teach spelling anymore, that they were just going to figure it out by the time they hit fifth grade. And no matter how much I argued and fussed with the teachers or the staff and said, hey, they need to learn how to spell, they fought me over this. And then when my son got to fifth grade, he went from an all-A student down to a failing student because they were now marking his papers wrong in every subject when he didn't have the words spelled correctly.
There you are.
And then I put out over $2,000 for him to go to Sylvan Learning Center the summer between 5th and 6th grade, so he could be at grade level when he went into middle school, and he wouldn't go in that far behind.
Right. There's one other thing I'd like to, well, I don't like to, but I have to mention it, and that is that I'm not sure that the colleges themselves are doing that awful much better. I had an opportunity to talk with a history major who will be a senior this year in college, and we got talking a little bit about the Civil War. And this history major could not tell me what was the cause of the Civil War. Now, I find that astounding.
God, it's
particularly
bad.
In a border state like Maryland, which was directly and physically involved with the Civil War, for a local student at a not a local college but a regional college, not to have been taught what the Civil War was about. So part of me says that it's systemic. It isn't the individual student. It isn't the individual parent. It isn't the individual teacher. They do the best they can, given what they have to contend with.
Yeah, that they do. And some of the teachers that I have spoken to personally, they're frustrated.
Oh, big time. Big time. The frustration is palpable.
Oh, well,
you see it on their faces, you hear it in their voices.
That we do. And they are afraid to stand up and say anything. When they do, they're chastised or they're threatened.
Sometimes they're chastised within the system by supervisors and principals, and sometimes they're intimidated, to be candid with you, by their union reps who say, you keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and you do what you're told.
And that was something that I would like to go into at the next segment. Can you hang on and stay with us for the next 15 minutes?
Sure.
All right. And what I would like for you to do, though, is finish that thought. We have about a minute left to go, but I wanted to make sure that I could get you to hang on for the next and last segment.
Fine.
So, did you hear that the union was telling the teachers that they could tell them, or they knew how they voted?
I've heard that. I can't validate it personally, but I have heard that from several sources.
Well, like I said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap up this session, but we're going to be back here in a few minutes. Bud, you're going to hold on. Folks, you are listening to Feathering the Eagle's Nest with Michelle Jefferson on Liberty Works Radio Network. And if you would like to call in for our last segment, the number here is 410-848-9191.
It's Liberty Works and around the globe. More real talk, the kind you want, on Liberty Works Radio Network.
evening, everyone. You are listening to Feathering the Eagle's Nest with Michelle Jefferson on Liberty Works Radio Network. The call-in number is 410-848-9191. And before we bring Bud back on, there's a few items of housekeeping that I'd like to go ahead and take care of. The website for this, in case you didn't already know that, is lwrn.net. And on that website, you will be able to make a donation. And one of the things that we are able to do here is keep the lights on with the donations that you guys send in. So please be sure to visit the website, that's lwrn.net, and make sure you hit that donation button. Again, the phone number is 410-848-9191. And Jane, if you're ready to go ahead and bring Bud back on, we're ready to go. Bud,
yes.
You there?
Yes.
Okay. So,
where did we leave off? Wrap up on what we were saying right before the break about the teachers and the kinds of intimidation that some of them may be feeling. I'm not currently a classroom teacher. I did teach graduate school at Hopkins a number of years ago, but where I teach in today's environment, I may well have received the same kind of promises or innuendos that some of today's teachers claim to be receiving. So be it.
Understood. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the things that we're going to benefit. Instead of talking about the crappy things about Common Core, why don't we focus the last few or the minutes that we have here on what the positive is in removing Common Core.
Right. One of the things that parents have the option today to do is to opt their children out of Common Core testing. The PARC is the acronym I believe is being used for it.
Right.
And the instructions, if you will, or the opportunity to learn how to do that is on our website, which is www.fedupwithcommoncore.com. If you drop the W's, it's still fedupwithcommoncore.com. And easy to navigate and easy to find the opt-out opportunities, which ties in with our larger goal, which is to opt the county school system out of Common Core. And we're working on a number of different options there. What we would like to do is to replace what Common Core is failing to do with a program comparable to what the state of Massachusetts had a number of years ago, which was, as I understand it, ranked 6th in the world.
Yes, it did.
They had great results and wound up with some very, very good graduates. The bottom line, to get back to real quickly to what I was talking about before with the total numbers of kids who have to take remedial classes just to be able to matriculate in college, is the fact that grammar school and high school, and I still look at it that way, are the opportunity for the foundational building blocks of education. They're not supposed to be to break kids' spirits or to frustrate teachers and parents. They're to provide the opportunity for students to learn the things they will need in order to be able to do the business for the rest of their lives, and for to go on with their careers or additional studies or whatever it may happen to be. So the opt-out opportunity is there on the website for parents.
And what's the website again?
And the website again is fedupwithcommoncore.com, and they're all over our billboards around the county right now. I want to pick up real quickly on something that Bob was talking about getting involved in politics.
Yes.
2,500 years ago, Plato, the philosopher, said that those who refused to participate in what he called public affairs, which was his phrase for politics, condemned themselves to the consequences. In other words, in today's vernacular, if you're simply staring at the screen, you're not in the game.
No, you're not.
And it's not easy, but it's got to be done.
Well, one of the things that maybe you guys can do once you get rid of Common Core is put the a class in that teaches the importance of the vote, that teaches the importance of participating in public affairs, and the importance of civic duty.
No question. I've been teaching that locally in community groups for the last several years and gotten very, very good response. Why it is no longer in the schools is something that I've yet to get an answer for.
Well, coming from someone like myself that always questioned authority, I do know that I have irritated every teacher that I have been in front of, not just in public school, but whenever I put myself through night school. Mm-hmm. I was always asking why, how come, and, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to challenge or question authority. And that is something that is really poo-pooed these days. And they seem to want kids who are sort of like the Stepford wives.
Right.
Like Stepford kids who just come in, they're perfect little children, sit there with their hands on the desk with smiles on their faces, feet firmly on the floor. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And just be little robots.
Well, for myself, I far prefer dealing with people who ask why than who say how high.
Amen to that one.
A quick story for you. Frederick Douglass, a freed black slave, mm-hmm. Taught himself how to read.
Yes, he did.
At a time when teaching slaves to read was illegal. Do you know why it was illegal? Because freedom is dangerous. Knowledge gets you freedom, and freedom is dangerous. They wanted to keep the blacks enslaved. They wanted to keep them ignorant. And in a very real sense, we're looking at the same kind of trend. I'm not talking about motivation, but I'm saying we're seeing the same kind of trend here with what the federal government is, I'm going to say it, forcing the states to force their local school systems to do. Local school systems are supposed to be autonomous. Local school boards are supposed to be autonomous. They're supposed to be the ones who make the decision as to what is the best course, the set of curricula for their particular students to be following to make their way in life with their careers, with their education, with where they want to be going to follow their dreams. Nothing that the federal government has ever tried from top down has ever worked as nearly as well as it ought to work. And that includes the military. Having spent enough time in the military to know that, I can say that. You know, we're good at some things, but we could be a whole lot better if we simply allow our native ingenuity and imagination to really do the job that God gave us to do.
And that's the part I think that they're trying to beat out of us.
Could be.
Is that creativity, is that imagination, and that desire to push the sides of the envelope and break the sound barrier, whatever it may be. Or, I mean, when I came of age in 1980, it was, okay, we get to break the glass ceiling. Mm-hmm. Okay, the sky was the limit.
Right.
And what do the kids have to look forward to now?
Right.
They're not being encouraged to reach for the stars.
Not at all.
And that's the scary part.
When you look at the current AP literature classes, the curriculum, mm-hmm. There are 3 books on there. One is a book by Hemingway, and I don't know the title of the book. He's a pretty good writer, and he actually wrote literature. The other 2 are economics textbooks. One's by a reporter. It is a cross between a series of newspaper reports and economic theory. The other one is pure economic theory. The problem with that one is that the author who put it out has had to make so many changes because his his edition was so erroneous that it's been basically discredited. Now, I don't see how either one of them qualifies as literature. Hemingway, yeah, but the other 2, no way. But that's AP literature class.
Oh, jeez.
And don't get me into AP U.S. history. That's what a mess.
Why don't you briefly touch on that? We have about 4 minutes.
George Washington gets one line. I don't believe Abraham Lincoln, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Martin Luther King, or any of the true American heroes are included in there. There's nothing in there about the Pilgrims or the Mayflower Compact. Bottom line
it's
is...
like learning about the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They're not going to learn about any of that, are they?
No, that's not important, except that supposedly Columbus and his bunch brought smallpox to the indigenous native people.
Oh, that's right. That was his contribution, not discovering America. That's right. I forgot about that in that revisionist history thing.
So I think it's time to get back to the facts rather than what somebody wants us to start believing.
Well, see, that's the whole thing about the facts, is that they keep repeating it over and over again. And you and I know that it doesn't matter how many times you repeat it. If it's wrong no matter what. But some of these folks who aren't participating in public affairs, they hear it, they believe it, and they take that as the gospel truth. But then whenever you try to tell them something different, oh no. Not, I heard it on the news or I heard it on the internet, it's this.
Right.
Maybe one of the things we also have to push for is people to start using cognitive and critical thinking all over again.
And critical thinking is not choosing between A and B. It's recognizing that there's more than just A or B. When you accept that there's only two options, that's a false dichotomy. There's always at least 3, 4, 5 other possibilities that are worth exploring before you decide on the best of the multiples of options that are in front of you. But when we create those false dichotomies where there's only A or B, you're leaving out, in most cases, a lot of very good options, and we're the poorer for it.
You are so right, Mr. Budd. All right, is there anything that, any last-minute things you'd like to go ahead and throw out here? Like I said, we only have a few minutes left on our time tonight.
Well, again, the website is fedupwithcommoncore.com. It does focus on Common Core, but with cause, with reason. The truth of the matter is that no matter how much the powers that be try to push Common Core as being state-led, the fact of the matter is that it was put together by a group of private companies and propagated by the U.S. Department of Education outside their own sphere, legal sphere of authority, and put onto the various local school boards by the different states that are bought in. By the way, a lot of those states have had second thoughts and are either backing out or rethinking their position. And I just saw today where the governor of Pennsylvania has taken a fresh look and said, maybe we ought to rethink this. And maybe we ought to do the same thing here in Maryland.
Well, I say we rethink it all the way across the board and kick it out, rip it out, pull it out, whatever we have to do. We have to get it done. Well, Bud, thank you very much for taking the time to call here this evening. You've given us an awful lot of information to look at, to listen to, and to think about. And best of luck in the election. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon, between now and the election.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, we are getting to the end of the program, and I would like to take this time to say thank you very much for listening to this radio station. Like I said last week, that you actually have to pick up the computer or the mouse and listen. It's not just a dial. I greatly appreciate it. I hope everybody has a safe and wonderful week, and don't hold your breath when you're listening to the president tonight. I think he's going to end up by disappointing us a whole bunch. Stay safe, stay strong, and stay America, folks. And thank you again.